So I want to talk to you today about some developmental issues with regard to your children and how they are being affected by your separation and the shared parenting that's going to be happening in their life. Obviously, when a family breaks up, that's stressful for everybody, but it's stressful in different ways for adults than it is for children. Because as adults, we're already fully formed, we have our personality already pretty set, and children are in the process of forming that, and they experience it very differently depending upon what age they are. You can develop a parenting plan for your children based upon what their needs are now, and what you need to keep in mind is that that won't necessarily be a plan that's going to work for them throughout their life. It'll be a plan that you need to tweak a little bit as time goes by. You might want to revisit it every couple of years and make a new plan. What a child needs at 3 is different from what they need when they're school-aged or 12 or 18. Some people make the entire plan in advance and have it all written out if they don't want to have to renegotiate later on, and some people do just sit down with each other every couple of years and redo it. So it's up to you how you do that. The development that your children are going through right now, it is somewhat predictable, and we have some information in the packet for you. On pages 12 to 14, we have an outline of what children look like at different ages. What are their developmental tasks? What are their needs from you? And what are some warning signs that would let you know that they're struggling quite a bit and need some help from you? And I'm just going to go over that briefly, but you can have time to look at it later at home. This development can be interrupted by a change as big as a divorce, and sometimes tasks that your child may have accomplished already, they have to go back and redo those because just the stress of the new situation sort of sets them off of their path a little bit. So it's just important to remember that the parenting plan that you develop initially may not be a one-time solution. The other thing is, most people don't do this, but you certainly can make a different plan for children in your family now who are different ages. If you have a toddler, they may need a different thing in terms of their parenting plan than if they have an older brother or sister who's school-aged or even older, and you can make a different plan for different children. So I just want to go over each segment briefly. Infants and toddlers, ages birth to about 3, their main task is to develop trust and to attach to one primary caregiver. And the primary caregiver is the person who is the one who the child relies upon to take care of them, the person who feeds them and bathes them and soothes them when they're unhappy, the person that they are used to taking care of them. It doesn't necessarily mean that that is a better parent, but children do typically form one primary attachment, and then they use that as the foundation for forming future relationships with other people. And it's really important in the first 2 to 3 years of life that the child have daily, regular access to this primary caregiver. And so a plan for this age range that says the child is going to be in this home for a week and in this home for a week, that doesn't work well for children of this age, partly because they don't have yet what we call object constancy, and that's a psychological term for the idea that the child is not capable yet of holding in their mind anything or anyone that is not right there in their presence. So if they have an attachment to a primary caregiver, often it's the mother, not always, but they rely upon that person for their sense of well-being, and then they are removed from that person. Even if they're being cared for well by another person, if they're not as familiar with that person, they're going to be very distressed about not having contact, because since they don't have object constancy, they don't remember that that other person still exists. They can't hold them in their mind the way that we can later on in life. Having pictures of them, obviously they can't talk on the phone. When you get to the older end of that range, 2 or 3, they can talk on the phone, but it's not the same thing. They do start to develop that by about 2.5 or 3 years old. And so a parenting plan for a child that young, since their task is to develop trust, and they need predictability and consistency, they need a routine, the best parenting plan, if they've been cared for by one primary parent, is to be in that parent's home every night for bed, and to have shorter visits with the other parent, daily if possible, so that they really get to know this other parent and start to rely on them and sort of develop 2 primary caregivers before you would move into any overnights. And then the overnights would be like 1 overnight for a few months, and then maybe add that to 2 overnights in a row, something like that. Part of this also depends upon what was the parenting plan prior to the separation or divorce, and that's true of all of the age ranges. It used to be you know, a generation ago, when there was a divorce or separation, the most common parenting plan was the children stay in the family home with the mother. She was typically the primary parent, and the father had been working outside of the home anyway, and so then he would see the children on the weekend or every other weekend. A lot of families don't look like that anymore. And if your family is one where both parents really have played the role of the primary caregiver, they have fed, they have bathed, they have put the children to bed, and they have sort of taken turns with that, the children can handle more time away from one parent or the other than if they did have a primary one. You'll notice on pages 15 to 21 we have put together several sample parenting plans for you, and for each age range we have an A and a B and a C. And the reason for that is because of what I was just talking about, that there are different pre-divorce parenting situations. Maybe both parents work outside of the home and the child is in daycare much of the day. So then they're used to being cared for by other adults, and they can tolerate longer periods away from each parent. If the child has been parented primarily by one parent and the other parent they see in the evening and on weekends, then they need to have that same plan, at least to begin with, and sort of gradually move into a plan where there's more shared custody. And then there's an in-between. So you can look at those also later. So children in this first age range, they're developing trust, they're developing an attachment, they need predictability and consistency, they need that healthy attachment to their primary caregiver to be honored. They need to know that a loving adult is always available. They need predictability. If they're distressed, you might see excessive crying and clinging. You might see some disruption in their feeding and sleeping patterns. If they have become toilet trained, maybe they won't be. They might go back, slip back, and then have to accomplish that again. You might see some delay in development and some irritability. And so then if we're going to move on now to ages 3 to 5, their developmental task is to engage more with the outside world, to start to develop relationships with other children, and to start to better understand the limits that are being given to them by caregivers. And what they need from you is continued predictability and routine and structure. They do have an increased ability to hold a person in their mind. They have that object constancy. They need freedom from direct conflict. They need to not hear or see or be aware of their parents fighting. That's very upsetting for children. They might benefit from bigger blocks of time with each parent at this age, especially towards the latter part, the 5-year-old. Since they are just learning about limits and rules, it's helpful for them if the rules in each of their homes can be pretty similar, so that they don't have to try and learn 2 different ones. If they are distressed, again, you're going to see some regression in any developmental skills that they have accomplished, maybe toileting, sleeping, eating, some irritability and clingy behavior, maybe some anger and acting out, and that would let you know that they're struggling and they need some extra help. So then ages 6 to 8, the early elementary ages. Children at this age, what they're doing developmentally is they're increasing their understanding about the difference between fantasy and reality. Prior to this, children are really not that sure about the difference between fantasy and reality, and a lot of their fantasies are going to be around this event that has happened in their life. And they're also very self-centered at this age and prior to this age, and they tend to think that everything that happens in their world is about them. So they're going to blame themselves for the separation or divorce, and they're also going to engage in a fantasy that if they can do the right thing, if they can say the right thing, they can somehow get you back together. And they really need to hear regularly that the divorce is not their fault. This was a grown-up decision, especially if they've ever heard you fighting about them, about how to discipline kids or what the rules are going to be. They're going to take that on and blame themselves, and they need a lot of reassurance from you that that's not the case. So they need to be reminded of that. They need structured and consistent time with each parent. They start to develop more peer relationships. They deepen their attachments with people other than their parents. They start to notice gender differences more. They really believe in fairness. If you asked them, how much time would you like with your mom or your dad? And I'm actually not suggesting that you ask them that. I think that's puts a lot of pressure on children. It's a really dangerous question. But if you did ask them, they often say at this age, I want it exactly 50-50. A week here and a week there, or 3.5 days here and 3.5 days there, because they really believe in fairness and they want to make sure they're being fair. They need parental support for their school and extracurricular activities. They need support from both parents, that they are exploring new relationships and new activities. If one parent signs them up for gymnastics and another parent says, oh, I don't like gymnastics, I'm going to take them to soccer when they're on my week, that's really disruptive to the child. They need to have one life. And they share that life in your home and in your ex's home, but it needs to feel like one life to them, and they need to have that respected and honored. Children in this age range, if they're distressed, what you're going to see is oftentimes physical complaints, stomach aches, headaches, don't want to go to school, still some sleep problems maybe, expression of anger and some behavioral acting out, maybe some regression to bedwetting and baby talk and things like that would let you know that they're really struggling and need some extra help. So in the preteen age range, 9 to 12, the developmental task for this age range is that the children are attempting to learn how to feel good about themselves as their body changes. They begin to develop and test some values and beliefs. They really focus on being connected to their peers and their school and community. And so they're focused away from the home somewhat. And they need a lot of consistency with their schedule, predictability. They need, just like the time frame before this, the age range before this, they need parental support from both parents for the activities that they're interested in. They need both parents to come to their activities and be positive about them and take them to their practices and whatnot. They want more open communication with parents. They're going to want to hear more about what's going on in the planning. And it's important to talk with them about it without giving them the impression that they are going to be making the decisions or that it's up to them, because again, that's too much pressure for children. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. They still need reminders that the divorce and separation are not their fault, that they can't do anything to solve it, that this really is a grown-up issue. If children in this age range are suffering quite a bit, what you're going to see in terms of distress is maybe a loss of interest in friends and other relationships. They might isolate themselves. They might become depressed. They might be quite rebellious, maybe not towards both parents, sometimes just towards one. Or they might do the opposite and become too good, trying to sort of emotionally take care of their parent by not being any trouble. So those are things that you might watch out for, and if they're struggling, then give them some extra help. Then the age range, 13 to 18, the developmental tasks here are to develop greater independence and to start to strike out and separate from their family. This age range, prior to age 6 and then the adolescent age range, are actually the two age ranges that the psychological research says kids struggle the most if a separation or divorce happens right during this time period. The analogy that I like to think of here is that teenagers, especially in the latter part of this age range, are getting ready to emancipate. They are going to go out into the world, and it's like they're little baby birds, and they're standing on the edge of the nest, and they're getting ready to try their wings, and the nest is falling apart underneath their feet. And it's very difficult for them at this age. They come back around to a natural self-centeredness as teenagers. Children are very self-centered, as I said. In the early years, they think the whole world revolves around them, and as teenagers, they know the whole world doesn't revolve around them, but maybe they want it to, and they can be pretty mad at their parents about breaking up right now. Couldn't you just wait until I'm done with high school and then do what you need to do with your life? You're messing up my life. And that's really normal. They're developing a sense of morals and values. It's a normal developmental task for them to express resistance and rebellion and to sort of reject their parents. And when their parents are going through something like this, it sort of interrupts that normal trajectory for the teenagers. What they need is a lot of flexibility and understanding from their parents about the parenting plan. They have a lot of activities that are important to them. And if the parenting plan says you live primarily with this parent, but you see this parent on the weekend, but the weekend is when they have their job, or they want to get together with their boyfriend or girlfriend, that's what they're supposed to be doing right now in their life. And they need you to honor that as part of the parenting plan, that they are not supposed to be focusing on their relationships with their parents. And you may not get to see them as much, but that's really what they need. They still need reminders that the separation or divorce is not their fault. Many teens want a say in the parenting plan. And it's really important that you listen to them, but I don't recommend, even when kids are 14, 15, 16, 17, they often do not know what is best for them. They may say, well, I want to live with this parent more because they experience that parent as more lenient and they can get away with more stuff. That's not necessarily what's best for them. Or they may say, I want to live with this parent because maybe that relationship with that parent isn't as strong and they're afraid that they will lose them entirely. Or they may want to live with a parent because they feel like this parent is really struggling, they're falling apart emotionally, and they want to take care of them. None of that is based on what their best interests are. And it's really important for you as the adults to make the decision and to let the kids know we're going to listen to your input, but you're not making the decision, because still that's too much pressure for them. Even if they insist, I'm ready to make this decision and you should let me make it, it's not fair. How many teenagers really know what's best for them as opposed to what they want? What we want and what we need are not always the same thing. And it's your job as the parent to make those grown-up decisions. They need positive role models from you, from both sides. They need reasonable, firm, and fair guidance. If things are similar in both homes, that's always helpful no matter what age. If children in this age range are really struggling, you might see excessive anger and negativity. You might see some of that isolation and depression. Again, they might be trying to be too good, trying to take care of the parent and not be extra stressed to them. They might have difficulty with school or peers. They might try to become your confidant. A lot of kids, as they get older, they want to hear all the gory details about what you fought with with the other parent, why are you getting divorced, and I really urge you not to tell them too much. Even though they may try to listen in on your conversations. They may hide around the corner if you think you're waiting until they're in bed and you're talking to your spouse and having an argument with them on the phone late at night. I've had a lot of kids come into my practice and say, yeah, my parents don't think I'm listening, but I actually sneak over and listen because I'm just dying to know what's going on. But it's important for you to protect them from that. The research shows that the most important thing children need to help them come through this time period in a resilient way and not to suffer too much is they need freedom from involvement in the parental conflict. They need to not hear how angry you are at the other parent. This other parent is part of them, and they may have really betrayed you and hurt you, and maybe you're angry at them, but they need ongoing permission from you. Not just permission, but encouragement for them to have a relationship with this other parent, to love that parent. They need positive feedback from you about aspects of them that are like this other parent, rather than negativity about the parts of them that are like the other parent. They need consistency and predictability. They need those constant reminders that it's not their fault and they can't solve it. But most important is freedom from involvement in the conflict between the two of you. So that's what I have to say about the child development, and I want to talk to you about a couple of other issues as well. One of those is post-divorce survival strategies. This is a very difficult time for you, and it's important for you to build up your support network. Seek out time with your friends, your family, clergy if that's a part of your life, maybe professional help if you think that would be helpful to you. Develop new activities and interests that maybe you didn't have time for or there wasn't really room for in your previous relationship. This is an opportunity for you to really redefine yourself and to start off on a new path in life. And so take up hobbies and activities that might interest you. You know, the healthier that you can be, the better you can be as part of your child's support system and really be there for them. And I just want to re-emphasize that you are definitely the most important part of your child's support system, but they are not part of yours. They are not your confidant. And even though they might like that, you shouldn't make them your confidant. You need to use your adult friends for that. You need to work on your new co-parenting relationship with your ex. Whatever feelings you have towards them, if you can do your best to resolve those, and if you can't resolve them, put them aside, set them aside, so that when you interact with this other person, you do it almost like you would in a professional relationship. You're polite, you're calm, you don't get into personal details, you just talk about what you need to talk about with regards to parenting these children together. You may not be married to this person anymore, but you're going to be co-parents of these children, even past when the children are adults. They have graduations, they're going to get married, there's going to be grandchildren, and you're going to both need to be part of their lives. And the sooner that you can form a respectful relationship with each other, the better off everyone will be. And I want to say a few things about dating after divorce. Most people do go on and develop future relationships after a divorce. And it's important to think about how that's going to affect your children as you begin on that process. We all know that when we're first dating, we meet a variety of people, we get to know them, we spend a little bit of time. Some of those people are not going to stay in our lives for any length of time. We're going to discover this isn't really a good match for me. And if your child gets to know each of those people, and they get attached to them, you have to remember they're in a very vulnerable state. They've had a big loss. Whomever you're dating is probably going to be very nice to the kids, and they may form an attachment to that person. And then if you decide 3 months down the line or 6 months down the line that this isn't the person for you, it's another loss for your children. So my advice is that you do that dating during the time when the children are with the other parent, Not that you have to be secretive about it or that the kids can't know that you're dating, but they don't necessarily need to form a relationship with anybody new in your life unless you're pretty sure that person is going to stick around over the long term. And then it is safe to start to gradually introduce them to the kids. And finally, I want to talk to you about what a parenting plan evaluation looks like. As you're going to hear throughout this course today, everyone is recommending that if you can negotiate and develop your parenting plan between the two of you, that is the best way to go about it. You know your kids the best. You know what their needs are. This is going to lead to the least rancor, the least antagonism between the two of you. Sometimes, though, that just can't happen. What your ex is suggesting for a parenting plan is something that you really disagree with. You think it would be harmful to the kids, and you can't agree with that. And then sometimes people will seek mediation. That's one step where you sit down with a professional, an attorney or a mental health professional. Both are helpful. I do this in my practice, and there are others who do this in their practice as well, to sort of talk about, if you're pretty close to what a good parenting plan that you could both agree to, then you can maybe do that with a mediator. You can talk about it with each other. If you can't, though, a parenting plan evaluation is something that you can come and do with a psychologist. I do these in my practice, as do others in the area. And this is what I do, and a lot of folks do them very similarly, so I think this would be a good summary. Everyone comes in, and I do testing with them, psychological testing to see if there are any personality issues, substance abuse issues, things like that. Parenting testing and psychological testing with the children to see whatever issues they might have and what their needs are. And then I do observations of each parent with each child and with groups of children, and that would include new step-parents if there are step-parent figures, fiancés or live-in partners. I also talk to a lot of collateral sources that either parent says, would you talk to this person? Maybe it's a daycare provider or a teacher or a therapist or sometimes friends and family who have some input about the parenting plan. Look at all kinds of documents, and then I would write up a report with recommendations about the plan. This is a process that can be quite helpful in developing a good parenting plan, but there also is a downside to it. It's expensive, for one thing. They cost about $6,000 or $7,000 on top of your attorney fees. And typically, if you get to the point where you've tried to negotiate with your ex and you've been unable to, and you're now having a parenting plan, there's a lot of anger and animosity, and that comes out in the interviews. I'm talking with folks, and typically people present themselves as really the good parent, and my ex is the bad parent, and talk about all of that person's faults, and they're going to talk about all of your faults. And that process can lead to even more anger and animosity. And at the end, you're still going to end up with a parenting plan. You're still going to need to parent these children together. And so if you can avoid that process by developing the plan yourself and not having to go through more of a competitive process, then everyone is going to be better off. And that's all I have to say, and I want to wish you good luck in developing your parenting plan. Thank you for your attention.